Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being part of this discussion, and thank you for all the great panelists for your contributions in advance. Now, I think all of you would be aware that end of last year, as the Chancellor just said in her speech as well, the UK government published the National Payments Vision, which was, frankly, a long-awaited document, a long-awaited vision to drive a level of innovation and forward-looking thinking in the UK payments ecosystem broadly. There's been many attempts around certain initiatives which have been fairly siloed. This was an attempt to bring together the vision across multiple areas of the market. And just as a refresh and a reminder, the National Payments Vision broadly touched upon 4 to 5 key areas of the market. One was to provide regulatory clarity and streamlining, as a result of which we're seeing FCA become a more major regulator in the payments space. Secondly, there has been quite a lot of focus on market infrastructure, the innovation required in the market infrastructure, and the resilience of the market infrastructure. The other area that was of quite a lot of focus in the vision document was around open banking, how to make open banking work in the UK, driving that account-to-account revolution, both in the UK and leveraging that to drive account-to-account payment ecosystem revolution in other markets. And very importantly, how does UK remain at the forefront of innovation and driving the change that's required, as a result of which digital pound and digital identity initiatives were articulated in the vision. And to oversee all of this, the Payments Vision Delivery Committee has been set up to make sure that we actually drive the vision to some sort of outcomes. So on that point, Dan, I just wanted to sort of start with you and ask around, this time around, how do we make sure that the vision is delivered and we get the tangible outcomes that the UK market so desperately needs?
So I think it's a really important question. So many of us have been in these sort of rooms before where there's a lot of commitment, but the follow-through is a bit more limited. I do think the National Payments Vision is different. Now, I'm not just saying that. I think there is a real energy around the National Payments Vision, which I haven't seen in some other areas. But also, I think what we all have to bear in mind is the opportunity here. There are quite a number of areas where the UK has got a little bit stuck, whether it be on aspects of infrastructure or even aspects of open banking, despite the successes we have seen there. So what I'm really seeing is that if people really get that opportunity, which I do think, I'm not just saying it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity, I think the level of political focus, the level of industry focus cannot be squandered. And I think that's really, really significant. I also think that in order to deliver the tangible outcomes, though, we do need to see a step change in collaboration. Ultimately, in payments, very little happens if there isn't collaboration between different parties in the ecosystem. And that's why I think it is really, really important that we take full advantage of the clear vision provided by the National Payments Vision to make progress. And one of my watchwords in all of this is that, and I'll channel the Rolling Stones here, because that's always what we should be thinking about when we're thinking about visions of things, that people can't always have exactly what they want, that we do need to compromise in some of these areas if we're going to make progress. When I look at things like open banking, for example, commercial model, we could have an argument for the next 300 years about it, but actually we have to work out what is enough to make some real progress. And then on the tangibles, if we don't, again, one of the benefits of the National Payments Vision is it does set out some deliverables by timescales. And we really have to, on infrastructure at the end of this quarter, a vision for retail bank infrastructure, enhanced collaboration between the regulators. We're very clear as we get merged into the FCA, a step which we think is a genuinely practical and welcome initiative, that we have to play our role in collaboration, but also the industry does need that sense of roadmap and vision as we get into the second half of the year. So delivering on those tangibles, but also keeping the focus on those intangibles, how we work together, how we keep focused on the prize, I think is extremely important.
Thank you, Dan. Very, very well articulated. Andy, just coming on to you, having heard what Dan just articulated, how do you see opportunity as a result of what's been articulated in the vision document? And for players like Monzo, do you see it delivers on the overall value proposition that you're trying to deliver as a result of the disruptor of the market to some extent?
Yeah, look, I'm still trying to get my head around a regulator quoting Mick Jagger when talking about payments infrastructure. But I did like that. Look, when I look at this stuff, I look at it through two lenses. One is customer and product, and I'll park that for a second and we can come back to it. The other one is the infrastructure and the underlying kit that my engineers are going to have to build against and plug into. I think we've got this massive opportunity to all come together now and say, for that infrastructure, we're going to set an incredibly high bar. It's going to be cloud native. It's going to be API based and as easy to integrate to for a bank and for my engineers as it is for a merchant to integrate with somebody like Stripe. Like, it should take a couple of hours tops. Bit of testing, bit of scheme to overlay over the top to make sure everything's nice and safe, but the integration work itself should be super slick, and it should be scalable and interoperable. And what we mean by that is actually customers don't face this sort of last mile hurdle when receiving payments from overseas, where the bank in Australia sent the money 3 days ago, and then it takes another 2 days to sort of work its way through the system and actually get settled. So those are the big ones I think about when I'm thinking about the infrastructure. For customers, coming back to like probably the most important part, everyone's talking about Pix and UPI at the moment. It's sort of on everybody's lips when you come to events like this. When I do a side-by-side comparison of what customers using that infrastructure have and what customers currently have in the UK, it's pretty close. Like, the only thing that's missing really is QR codes at point of sale. As an industry, we could get together and do that now. We don't need infrastructure renewal to make that happen. And so that, yeah, my big 2 points are let's work on the engineering side, let's work on the tech, let's work on the integration, make it super slick and easy, and almost sort of a no-brain decision to want to move to this new thing that we're going to build and off of the old rails. And then I make a plea to industry to say, look, we're not blocked by infrastructure renewal if we want to innovate. If we want to do stuff like QR codes, let's get together and do it. Let's drive that kind of merchant adoption and customer adoption if the product's great. But yeah, we don't need big regulatory change and legislative change to make innovation happen on the rails that we've currently got, I don't think.
Great. Well, spoken truly in a digital manner about the product and the engineering side. And Iana and Paul, let me just come on to both of you. Very digital native, very strong digital heritage across both Block and Stripe. Let me start with you, Iana. Some of the points that Andy made around leapfrogging innovation. I didn't want to bring out UPI and Pix, but I think it's a good reminder for us to say, well, to some extent, that's already happened. How do we use this as an opportunity in the UK to leapfrog innovation? And particularly in the merchant space, where do you see innovation being the most impactful?
Yeah, so I think when I think about payments in the UK, I think mainly about our Square business and the fact that obviously we support a range of small businesses, merchants, your local coffee shop, to take payments. And it's interesting, actually, one of our small businesses has put me in a WhatsApp group of 700 coffee shop owners, which is overwhelming. And if anyone has a broken coffee machine, I am now your woman. But I found it really illuminating because it's interesting to see the things that they're asking each other about as it relates to payments. And the two things that I can see that are coming up most often are cost and resilience. And I think the promise of the National Payments Vision and that sort of forward-looking strategy to get to an account-to-account sort of like point-of-sale retail element is really strong in being able to solve for both of those pieces of work. You know, on the cost side, optionality. You know, my boss earlier today, Samina, said we want optionality. We want to give people a choice of the different types of payment options that they can have, and equally around that also solves for resilience. You know, if the card machine was down at Pret the other day and they didn't get my money because I only had my phone with me, how do we get to a point where we've got the plethora of options that are available? And I do think that the UK is such a unique market in having the infrastructure, in having the tech talent, in having the regulatory certainty and the will to do well, that, you know, for us, it's not about resting on our laurels, it's about pushing for what the next thing is. And the merchants don't know. Ultimately, the merchants just say, we just want low costs, and we just want the resilience. But actually, it's incumbent upon us to look ahead and think, well, what does that look like? And I think for us, that looks like a diversity of payment options that's available to them whenever they need it. And I think when you think about infrastructure, that tech stack that Andy was talking about has to be scalable to lots of different options. We talk about FPS, we talk about BACS, we talk about, you know, lots, but you know, stable coins is the big growing thing in the community today. So how can we bring that all together and make it as interoperable as possible? Because that's what gives our business the comfort that actually there is a huge amount of opportunity here in terms of building out that diversity.
Great. Paul, what are your thoughts?
So firstly, I wish I'd listened to more Rolling Stones so I could add another analogy here. So I will not try to butcher that. Look, I agree with a lot of what Iana just said, that in terms about merchant choice. I think we see a lot of that today at Stripe as well in terms of our users. So I think that's a really important starting point we need to think about, because ultimately the MPV is only going to be successful if we think about who the actual end users are, both on the merchant and the consumer side. I think if I just step back for a second and think about why we've got the MPV today, and kind of you mentioned what's that opportunity we're going to get to leapfrog, other markets and where we are today. I think for me, I think to what we've achieved so far, particularly over the last 10, 15 years in UK payments. And if you think about the work that the FCA has done to pioneer open banking, the sandbox, and all the great work that it's done, and we've heard a lot about today already at the conference. And on the other side, we've had the Bank of England be genuinely a world leader in opening up access to payment infrastructure. And a lot of countries, whether it was FPS or then other things that the bank has done, have looked at kind of what they can learn from us and then implemented their own next generation infrastructure. It's incumbent on us to now think about, okay, well, we know where we've had success for supporting non-bank payment firms, whether it's through regimes like e-money institutions or payment service providers, through the FCA, and then on the Bank of England side with the opening access to infrastructure. It's like, what does the next iteration of that support look like to not only support the firms that are already in the market today, the likes of ourselves and Block, for example, but also the next wave of fintechs that are going to come through, and how we can building that pipeline. So for us, when we think about it, it's a case of, okay, there's been really good work to open up access to infrastructure. Andy's mentioned the importance of that, but there's more to be done to kind of create that level playing field to particularly inject competition as we see it from that non-bank payment service provider side.
And the vision document does it, in your opinion?
I think it does it in the sense that it creates the space to have that conversation through what Dan mentioned in terms of the deliverable around the future of retail payments infrastructure. I think that's the first deliverable that is being discussed by the Payments Vision Delivery Committee. So I think these next few months are critical to kind of get that right, to understand what that roadmap is going to look like, to ensure that we're not sat here in 2 years' time talking about the MPV Part 2.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. In fact, let me just come on to, we've moved from quite a lot from regulator policy and business view to, I'd love to get your thoughts on consumers. Do you think the vision document has addressed, as you might see, given your incredible background in this space, has it addressed any of the consumer concerns, the innovation that consumers can benefit from?
So I think the National Payments Vision is really good in setting out a kind of high aspiration of kind of more choice and competition on next-gen technology. It also has a really important part where it talks about making sure it's for all consumers. But I do think there's a job for the Payments Vision Delivery Committee and the Vision Engagement Group really to say, well, what does that mean downstream for consumers? I'm not clear where we expect things to be for consumers or SMEs actually in 10 years' time. What does the future look like? What are those kind of key issues that we'll have dealt with or have superseded? And how do we envisage the future looking? And I think that's where some more thinking about what does that strategy look like? What are we actually going to deliver would be really, really helpful. And there are some areas I've been working on with civil society and consumer representatives that are kind of current issues. And when I say current, they were identified by the Payment Strategy Forum, many of these, 10 years ago, and we haven't quite dealt with them. So, and some of these are kind of very obvious. Access and inclusion. So we have digital payments that are not attractive to people on low and unstable incomes because they do not provide enough control. We suggested a request to pay option as something that's not been delivered. Yet SEPA request to pay exists in Europe. So we have these kind of like, things where we could be taking the bull by horns and dealing with it, but we haven't quite got there. Cash. We still have a lot of people using cash. How are we going to make these digital payments attractive so that we can move them and improve digital inclusion in the UK and financial inclusion? That's a really core component, and I think our strategy must look at how it's going to deal with cash, how it's going to deal with including lots of people who haven't until this point really wanted to be included within the system. And that goes to the kinds of points around trust and security. People need to feel that there's kind of like that fraud and scams are not a threat to them, either because there's assurance for them, because they're going to be repaid through the scams reimbursement or whatever, or because actually the type of payment you make doesn't matter because either some useful AI has identified the risks and mitigated that. So you have a risk-based payments protection model which doesn't rely on the consumer choosing, or because actually it's just consistent across the piece. But we think we need to move forward. There are some everyday challenges. We still have continuous payment authorities with subscription traps. That's a real nuisance, not dealt with. The authentication fatigue. So we've got these things to think about. I think there's real opportunity in cross-border payments. How do we absolutely kind of make those much cheaper, much more certainty, much slicker, real opportunity for growth? And of course, we talked about SMEs already. So I feel like there's a real opportunity, choice and competition, wonderful kind of tenets even, but a bit bland. What does it mean? What is going to change for consumers and SMEs? And that's what I'm really interested in seeing in that vision, and particularly what's that public-private partnership, because some of the things we see, they are not, in and of themselves, without clear government direction, necessarily commercially viable at first view. I think there's big growth opportunities in bringing more people into digital payments, but it requires some kind of working together to look at what does that look like, how do we make it work together. So yeah, that would be, I think there's a bit of work to be done.
Excellent. I think it's a great vision of the vision document, and I think outcomes focused has to be the way forward. We have to deliver on these objectives, and I think if the consumers benefit from innovation of all sorts, it's the interest of the economy, it's in the interest of the business and the regulators and policymakers. I think just to that point, you mentioned, Iana, this word around interoperability, right? I'd love to get your views and others who have an opinion on this. Is interoperability was missing in my mind in the vision document around the new forms of money and the current form of money. So stablecoin, digital pound, fiat, some of that stuff is going to have to coexist going forward. And some of those forms of money, to Faith's point, can actually be a great incentive structure, either because of the cash equivalence in the case of digital pound, or programmability for innovation, could be of interest to very many different customer segments. How do you see those two worlds coming together, and how does the vision document start to sort of bring some of those components on infrastructure, on commercial value propositions, and the players together in the ecosystem? Yeah,
take that one.
Please.
Oh, well, Kunal, you've shown me up for being someone who can't do their job properly, because I asked those same questions whilst the vision was being developed many, many months ago. And I did say, we are new forms of money. How do we bring those in? We've got an excellent team at the Bank of England working on developing the digital pound. How does it all fit together so the industry really knows and understands what the government is leaning on in terms of really driving that innovation? I think, listening to what Faith said as well, there is the industry will always be able to innovate, build the tech, build the infrastructure, build the APIs, the things that can talk to each other. The things that we're looking for, the regulatory certainty, and I guess the standards that develop that commercial model, as you said, that incentive for us to think, actually, this is something that we can invest in because we can see the value for our customers, for our merchants, and we can see that obviously we're able to grow a business on top of that. And I think that's where, you know, the direction from government comes from. I think that's where that partnership from regulators comes from in terms of helping to build that, you know, that sort of standards infrastructure, and then that ability for customers to understand, as you said, Faith, that however they're making the payment through whatever sort of mode, they have the ability to do that and do that safely and do that responsibly. So I think in as much as I don't want to add more to the payments vision, because I think we've got more than enough to chew on now, I do think that you're right, that is a missing piece. And thinking about all of the innovation that's happening at the moment and how things are moving so quickly and how firms are really pushing the dial, I think it's incumbent upon the UK to really take the opportunity to make sure that we're not baking in something that actually feels very legacy before we've even completed it.
Thank you, Anna. That's a great point. And listen, we are 2 minutes away from our allotted time slot, and I've been poor at time management. So I'm going to give you one question each, which has not been pre-prepared. But Paul, I'll start with you. What are the 2 things that excite you the most in the NPV, succinctly?
The deliverable in the first half of the year on the future retail payment infrastructure, I think having that cast iron guarantee that we're going to get that is a really exciting development, particularly what all the panelists have said. Second, I think this is going to sound really boring, but actually the commitment to have the governance framework from the public bodies, Treasury, Bank of England, FCA, PSR, to put them on the hook to deliver something, to your point earlier about like, how are we actually going to make sure this happens, that gives me comfort that it's going to be meaningfully different this time.
Great. Faith?
So I think I'm excited about the possibility of linking it, the NPV, with a load of other initiatives in the UK. What we see working really well in other countries is where you have accelerators like digital identity and digital wallets that actually help people manage some of this stuff and interact with it, and actually provides an overlay for all of those different proliferation of services and being interoperable. There's a kind of consumer-facing side. So I think digital wallets and also smart data, because we know that data and payments together is really powerful. So I'm excited about the potential for really looking at some of the other initiatives government are doing at the moment, how we join those up and make this actually a very vibrant and exciting place for payments and for consumer outcomes.
Thank you, Faith. Andy?
I'm excited by the raised bar on resilience and uptime. This is so important to us that we literally built a second bank we can switch to in the event of a cloud outage. Like it's 2025. We should have moved on from this bank outage thing a long time ago. So I'm hugely excited by that, and just the ability to build more fast, easy, like lovable products for our 12 million customers.
Great. Iana?
Well, I think I've just talked us into National Payments Vision 2, so I'm excited for that document when it comes. Sorry, Dan. As you said, you can't always get what you want. But I think the vision was incredibly ambitious. It was much more than I think, I thought we had in us, and actually it demonstrates there's a huge amount of goodwill and excitement about payments in the UK. So we're just excited to lean into that when we get to it.
Thank you, Anna. Right, Dan, why don't you round us up for 2? We're over time now.
Yeah, so 2 things very quickly from me where I think there is a huge opportunity for competition and innovation. We've already talked about infrastructure. I think getting that right is pivotal. Look around the world, get the infrastructure right. It provides a foundation. And the really significant opportunities for account-to-account and open banking, I think that's a massive opportunity to be taking. We need to be making progress on that this year.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all, and thank you to our